Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're all about getting things done. And I mean really getting things done. We're diving into Cal Newport's deep work and figuring out how to make this whole deep work thing actually work, especially in our crazy modern world. No more just talking about focus. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty of how to make it happen.
It's a timely deep dive. It seems like everyone's feeling overwhelmed and distracted these days, but the thing is, the ability to focus deeply, to do that deep work, is more valuable than ever.
Right. It's almost like a superpower.
Yeah.
So let's break it down for our listener. What exactly is deep work, and why should they even care?
Deep work is about dedicating focused, uninterrupted time to those tasks that really demand your brain power. Think of it like this. It's the difference between sorting through your emails and actually crafting a compelling presentation that's going to win over a new client. One is shallow work, the other is deep work.
Okay, so not just busy work, but the stuff that actually moves the needle. But why is it so hard to do this kind of work? I mean, haven't we always had to focus to get things done?
We have. But the modern workplace is a minefield of distractions. Open offices, constant emails, the allure of social media. It's like our attention is being pulled in a million directions at once.
And it's almost like we're rewarded for looking busy rather than actually being productive. I mean, haven't we all felt that pressure to have a packed calendar and an overflowing inbox?
Absolutely. It's the principle of least resistance in action. It's easier to answer emails and attend meetings than to actually block off time for deep, focused work. But here's the thing. Deep work, even if it feels harder up front, is where real value is created. It's where you innovate, solve complex problems, and develop skills that set you apart.
Okay. I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal. So
Yeah.
it's not just about getting more done. It's about doing more meaningful work, the kind of work that makes you feel challenged and fulfilled. But let's get practical. How do we actually incorporate deep work into our lives, especially when it feels like we're constantly fighting against the current of the modern workplace?
Right. We need strategies, not just theory. Well, Cal Newport actually lays out a few different philosophies for incorporating deep work. And the key is to find one that fits your personality and your work style.
Okay. Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, there's the monastic approach, which is all about total isolation, like a writer going off to a cabin in the woods with no internet or phone. That might work for some, but it's not realistic for most of us. Then there's the bimodal approach, where you alternate between intense periods of deep work and periods of more collaborative, open work. And then there's the rhythmic approach, where you build a regular deep work habit into your daily routine, maybe for a couple hours each morning.
Like Cal Newport's walk its route for productive meditation, where he'd literally walk and think through a problem.
Exactly. He found that physical movement helped him focus his mind. It's about finding what works for you. But the common thread across all of these philosophies is the commitment to carving out dedicated time for deep work and protecting that time fiercely.
All right, I'm ready to block off my calendar and get serious about deep work. But where do we start? What are some practical tips for making this happen?
Well, first you need to identify those deep work activities in your job. What are the tasks that require the most focus and concentration? The tasks that really push your cognitive abilities. Once you've identified them, you can start building strategies around them.
So, for a software developer, it might be writing code or designing algorithms. For a writer, it might be drafting a novel or a screenplay.
Exactly. It's about recognizing what your deep work looks like. Then you can start thinking about how to create the right environment for that work to flourish.
Okay, so how do we create that environment? Because let's face it, most workplaces are not exactly designed for deep work.
They're not, but that's why it's so important to be intentional about creating the conditions for focus. Start by minimizing distractions. This might mean finding a quiet space to work, turning off notifications on your phone, or even using a website blocker to prevent yourself from getting sucked into the internet vortex.
And maybe investing in some noise-canceling headphones. I know I can't live without mine. But what about those times when you can't physically escape the distractions? Like in an open office environment.
That's where rituals and routines come in.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these rituals.
Think of it like signaling to your brain that it's time to focus. It could be as simple as making a cup of tea, putting on your headphones, and lighting a candle. Or maybe it's a quick meditation or a few minutes of stretching. The key is to create a consistent routine that helps you transition into that focused state of mind.
I love that. It's like creating a mental trigger for deep work mode. It reminds me of athletes who have pre-game rituals to help them get into the zone.
Exactly. And just like athletes train their bodies, we need to train our minds for deep work. And part of that training is about being deliberate about when and where we work.
So, no more trying to squeeze in deep work between meetings or on the train ride home.
Probably not the most effective approach. Instead, think about scheduling dedicated blocks of time for deep work, just like you would schedule any other important meeting or appointment.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this all fits together. But what about those of us who feel like our schedules are already bursting at the seams? How do we find the time for deep work when it feels like there's simply not enough hours in the day?
That's where we need to get strategic about our time management. And one of the most powerful tools for doing that is Cal Newport's concept of fixed schedule productivity.
All right, I'm all ears. Tell me about this fixed schedule productivity.
It's about deciding when you work, and
Mhm.
more importantly, when you stop. It's about setting clear boundaries around your workday and sticking to them, no matter what.
So it's about setting boundaries, like no work after 6 p.m., no matter what.
Exactly. It's about creating a clear separation between your work life and your personal life. And the amazing thing is that when you know you have a hard stop, you become incredibly focused during your work hours. It's like that old saying, work expands to fill the time available for its completion. If you give yourself unlimited time, you'll just keep working and working and working.
And probably not doing your best work.
Right.
It's like trying to sprint a marathon. You might get to
Right.
the finish line eventually, but you're going to be exhausted and probably not setting any personal records.
Precisely. Fixed schedule productivity forces you to prioritize and be ruthless with your time. It's about saying no to the things that don't truly matter, so you can say yes to the deep work that does.
Okay, I'm convinced, but let's get specific. What are some strategies for actually implementing fixed schedule productivity? I mean, it's one
Yeah.
thing to say no work after 6 p.m.,
Right.
but it's another thing to actually make it happen.
That's where planning and discipline come in. Start by setting a clear end time for your workday and treat it like a sacred deadline. Then work backward from that deadline, scheduling in your deep work blocks first.
So it's like prioritizing the most important tasks first,
And then
fitting everything else around them.
Exactly. Don't let those shallow tasks, like emails and meetings, dictate your schedule. Instead, carve out the time for deep work and then see how everything else fits in.
This is a game changer. I'm already feeling more in control just thinking about it. But what about those unexpected things that pop up? The urgent requests, the last-minute meetings, the fire drills that seem to inevitably disrupt our best-laid plans.
Those are always going to be challenges. But having a fixed schedule helps you navigate those unexpected events more effectively.
Yeah.
You'll be more aware of how much time you actually have available, and you'll be less likely to let those urgent but unimportant tasks derail your entire day.
Okay, so it's not about being rigid. It's about having a framework that helps you stay focused on what matters most. But let's be honest. Even with the best intentions, sometimes those distractions sneak in. We get pulled into a meeting that could have been an email, or we find ourselves scrolling through social media when we should be working on that big project. How do we stay disciplined and resist those temptations?
That's where the concept of attention residue comes in. Have you ever noticed how even after you finish a meeting or check your email, it takes a while for your mind to fully refocus on the task at hand?
Absolutely. It's like my brain is still stuck in that meeting room,
Yeah,
even though I'm physically back at my desk.
exactly. That's attention residue, and it's a major productivity killer. Each time you switch tasks, you leave a little bit of your attention behind, and it takes time and energy to get it back.
The more we jump between tasks,
Yep.
the more attention residue we accumulate, and the less effective we become at doing deep work.
Precisely. That's why it's so important to minimize task switching and to create those dedicated blocks of time for deep work, where you can fully immerse yourself in the task at hand.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to multitasking. I always thought I was being super productive by juggling multiple things at once, but now I'm realizing that I might be sabotaging my own focus.
It's a common misconception. We often confuse busyness with productivity, but the two are not the same. True productivity is about doing the right things and doing them well, and that often means focusing on one thing at a time and giving it your undivided attention.
Okay, so we need to be mindful of attention residue and minimize task switching. But what about those times when we do have to switch gears, like when we have to move from a deep work session to a meeting? Are there any strategies for making that transition smoother?
Absolutely. One helpful technique is to create a shutdown ritual at the end of each deep work session.
I've heard Cal Newport talk about this. What exactly does a shutdown ritual involve?
It's about signaling to your brain that it's time to transition out of deep work mode. It could be as simple as closing your laptop, putting away your notes, and taking a few deep breaths. Or it could be a more elaborate routine that involves stretching, listening to music, or going for a walk.
So it's like giving your brain a chance to decompress and process everything. It's just absorbed.
Exactly. And it helps you avoid that feeling of mental clutter and overwhelm that can sometimes accompany deep work.
This is brilliant. I'm already feeling more relaxed just thinking about it. But let's talk about one of the biggest distractions of all, the internet. It's an incredible tool for work and communication, but it's also a bottomless pit of distractions. How do we harness the power of the internet without letting it hijack our focus?
That's a great question, and it's something Cal Newport addresses directly. He's not advocating for a complete digital detox. Instead, he encourages us to be more intentional about how we use the internet and to adopt what he calls the craftsman approach to technology.
Okay, what exactly is the craftsman approach?
It's about choosing your tools based on their actual value to you, not just their novelty or popularity. A craftsman carefully selects the tools that will help them create the best possible product. They're not swayed by the latest gadgets or fads. They focus on what works best for their craft.
So, it's about being discerning with our technology choices
Yeah.
and not just blindly adopting every new app or platform that comes along.
Exactly. And it's about asking yourself some tough questions. What are my core values? What are my goals? And how can technology help me achieve those goals without distracting me from what truly matters?
This is making me rethink my whole relationship with technology.
Oh,
I feel like I've been so focused on keeping up with the latest trends that I've lost sight of what's actually important to me. But let's get practical. What are some concrete steps we can take to apply the craftsman approach to our own digital lives?
one of the most powerful strategies is to identify the 20% of your online activities that actually contribute to your goals and eliminate the other
So it's
80%.
like the Pareto principle applied to the internet.
Exactly. It's about being ruthless with our time and attention and focusing on the online activities that actually move the needle.
Okay, I'm ready to do a digital declutter. But how do we actually figure out which activities fall into that essential 20%?
Start by listing out your most important professional and personal goals. Then, for each online activity, ask yourself, does this directly support my goals, or is it just a distraction? If it's not a clear yes, it's probably time to reconsider its place in your life.
This is such a simple but powerful framework. I'm starting to see how much time and energy I'm wasting on online activities that don't actually serve me. But let's talk about social media. It's such a pervasive part of our lives, both personally and professionally. How do we fit social media into the deep work equation?
That's a great question, and it's one that a lot of people struggle with. Social media can be a valuable tool for connecting with others, building your brand, and staying informed. But it can also be a major distraction, especially if you're not careful about how you use it.
I know I'm guilty of getting sucked into those endless scrolling sessions, even when I have important work to do. So how do we break free from the social media vortex?
Cal Newport suggests experimenting with a 30-day social media fast. Just completely disconnect from all platforms for a month and see what happens.
Whoa, that sounds intense. I don't know if I could go cold turkey for that long. But what's the rationale behind this experiment?
It's about gaining clarity on how social media is actually impacting your life.
Hmm.
Are you missing out on important connections? Are you feeling more stressed or anxious when you're constantly connected? Or do you find that you're actually more productive and focused when you're not tethered to your phone?
I'm starting to see the value in this experiment. It's like hitting the reset button on our relationship with social media.
Exactly. And it's not about demonizing social media. It's about reclaiming your time and attention and deciding how you want to use those precious resources.
Okay, I'm willing to give it a try. But even if we do manage to tame the internet beast and carve out time for deep work, there's still the challenge of actually staying focused during those deep work sessions. I mean, our brains are wired to seek out distractions. How do we train our minds to stay on task and resist those tempting interruptions?
It's true. Our brains are constantly seeking novelty and stimulation, but the good news is that focus is like a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it gets.
So how do we hit the mental gym and build that focus muscle?
One of the most effective techniques is mindfulness meditation. It's about training your mind to stay present and to observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment.
Okay, I've heard a lot about mindfulness meditation, but I've always been a little skeptical. How does it actually help with focus?
When you practice mindfulness meditation, you're essentially training your brain to recognize distractions as they arise and to gently redirect your attention back to the task at hand. It's like building a mental shield against those intrusive thoughts and impulses that can derail your focus. So, it's about developing that meta-awareness of our own thought patterns and learning to control them rather than letting them control us.
Exactly. And it's not just about meditation. There are other ways to train your focus muscle.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Try setting a timer for a short period, like 10 or 15 minutes, and focusing on a single task without any distractions. No email, no phone, no internet, just you and the task at hand.
Okay, that sounds doable. But what about those of us who have trouble sitting still for extended periods? Are there any strategies for more active focus training?
Absolutely. You could try going for a walk in nature, listening to calming music, or engaging in a hobby that requires focus, like knitting or drawing. The key is to find activities that help you quiet your mind and develop that ability to sustain your attention. I love this idea of finding activities that help us train our focus muscle in a way that feels enjoyable and engaging. It takes the pressure off of feeling like we have to force ourselves to sit still and meditate, if that's not our thing. But what about those times when we do need to buckle down and focus on a challenging task, even if it's not particularly enjoyable? Are there any strategies for making those tough, deep work sessions more manageable?
One helpful technique is to break down large tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Exactly. By breaking down a daunting task into smaller steps, you make it feel less overwhelming and more achievable, and as you complete each step, you gain a sense of momentum that propels you forward.
This is such a great reminder that we don't have to tackle everything at once. Sometimes it's about taking those small, consistent steps that ultimately lead to big results. But what about those really challenging tasks that require a lot of brain power? Are there any strategies for getting into that flow state where the work feels effortless and time just seems to fly by?
That flow state is the holy grail of deep work, isn't it? And the good news is that there are specific strategies you can use to increase your chances of entering that state.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me everything.
One of the most important factors is to choose tasks that are challenging enough to engage you, but not so difficult that they become overwhelming. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're pushing yourself just beyond your comfort zone.
So it's about finding that Goldilocks zone of challenge.
Exactly. And it's also important to have a clear goal in mind. When you know what you're trying to achieve, it's easier to stay focused and motivated.
I've definitely noticed that when I have a clear purpose, I'm much more likely to get into that flow state. But what about external factors, like our environment or our energy levels? Do those play a role in our ability to focus?
Absolutely. Your environment can have a huge impact on your ability to focus. Make sure you have a comfortable workspace with minimal distractions.
I'm working from the couch with the TV on in the background.
Probably not the most conducive environment for deep work. And pay attention to your energy levels. If you're feeling tired or drained, it's going to be much harder to focus.
This is making me realize how much I've been neglecting my own physical and mental well-being and the pursuit of productivity. It's like I've been trying to run my brain on fumes.
It's a common mistake. We often think that we can just power through fatigue, but the reality is that our brains need rest and rejuvenation, just like our bodies do.
Okay, so we need to prioritize sleep, nutrition, and exercise if we want to be able to do our best deep work. But what about mental breaks? Are those important too?
Absolutely. Taking regular breaks throughout the day is essential for maintaining focus and preventing burnout.
But how do we take breaks without getting sucked into distractions?
That's where planning comes in. Schedule short breaks into your workday, just like you would schedule meetings or appointments.
So, no more mindless scrolling through social media or checking email during breaks.
Try to resist those temptations. Instead, get up and move around, stretch, go for a walk, or chat with a colleague.
Okay, that sounds much more restorative than staring at a screen. But what about those times when we're really struggling to focus? Even after trying all of these strategies, are there any quick fixes for getting our brains back on track?
One technique that I find helpful is to simply change your environment. If you've been sitting at your desk for hours, try going for a walk or working from a different location.
I love that. Sometimes a change of scenery is all it takes to break out of a mental rut.
It's about disrupting those stagnant thought patterns and giving your brain a fresh perspective.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for approaching work and life with more intention and focus. But before we wrap up, I have one final question. We've talked a lot about the benefits of deep work for individuals, but what about the impact on teams and organizations? Does deep work have a place in a collaborative work environment?
That's a great question. And it's something that Cal Newport addresses in his book. He argues that deep work is actually essential for effective collaboration.
Okay, that seems a bit counterintuitive. How can focusing on individual deep work actually enhance teamwork?
When team members are able to do their best deep work, they bring more valuable insights and contributions to the table. They're better able to solve complex problems, come up with creative solutions, and communicate their ideas clearly and effectively.
It's about creating a culture where deep work is valued and supported.
Exactly. And it's about finding ways to balance individual deep work with collaborative work,
I'm starting to see how this all fits together. Deep work is not about isolation. It's about creating the conditions for individuals to do their best work.
which ultimately benefits the entire team.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that deep work is not just a productivity hack. It's a way of working and living that can lead to greater fulfillment, meaning impact. This has been such an inspiring conversation. I'm feeling energized and ready to tackle my to-do list with a newfound sense of focus. But before we sign off, I always like to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought to ponder. So, what's one question you want our listener to consider as they embark on their own deep work journey?
I'd ask, what would be possible if you could consistently tap into the power of deep work? What projects could you complete? What skills could you master? What impact could you make on the world?
That's a powerful question. And it reminds us that deep work is not just about getting things done. It's about unlocking our full potential and creating a life that feels both meaningful and impactful. So, to our listener, we encourage you to embrace the power of deep work and see what amazing things you can accomplish when you give yourself the gift of focus. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a topic that's guaranteed to make you think. Until then, stay curious and keep diving deep.